Hello, my name is Steve Trubey. I've been a member of the church since May of 2000. I am Paul Gregory's father-in-law. My life started out a little bit like Paul's. In 1997, I was convicted of aggravated assault on a police officer. I was driving my semi and I was trying to run over a bunch of cops. Anyway, I was facing 40 years in jail, and by the grace of God and God's providence, even back then, working in my life, and through an attorney, I got out with nothing but probation, 7 years probation, and they told me not to come back to Texas. So I came back here to Lakeland where I was living, and I quit doing drugs and alcohol, and I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't really know what. I wasn't really sure I wanted God in my life. I just wanted not to be a junkie anymore and not to be committing crimes. So I met my wife on the internet, and her and my daughter Angie Gregory taught me the gospel, and I was baptized May 17th, 2000. Not too long after that, I met a good friend at Corp, where I go to church here in Plant City. His name is Roger, and we got to be good friends, and he died. And at Roger's funeral, I found out that he's got a son serving a life sentence for rape and murder, attempted murder, and he was at Hamilton CI. I found out that really hurt my feelings that Roger didn't tell me that, he had a son serving a life sentence. Todd is his name. Todd Mays reached out and said he wanted to be baptized. Well, Connie, my wife, has a good friend named Debbie Shepherd, and Connie asked Debbie if she knew anybody up there that could go baptize Todd. And somehow Debbie knew about Daryl Townsend. So Connie and Daryl talked, and they talked about a lot of things, and Daryl went up to baptize Todd. And in that conversation, Connie talked to Daryl about me, about my past, and Daryl was very interested and wanted to meet me and possibly get me involved as a volunteer to go in and work behind the gates in the prisons. So it was sometime late 2010, that I met Daryl at a barbecue restaurant in Stark, Florida. We ate and had a good talk. I told Daryl about my whole past and all my criminal activity and stuff that I was doing. And he said I would be a good person to be a volunteer, to go in and teach Bible study and preach and just tell the men my story and about how God's grace is even for them. That we can change. Just because you've led a bad life doesn't mean you can't change and work hard in God's kingdom to serve Him. So not too long after that, Daryl gave me the paperwork, and I was approved as a volunteer for Department of Corrections here in Florida. I was still a little bit anxious about going inside the gates. So I would send out men correspondence courses. I just looked up men's names. I started with A's and went up through the alphabet and just wrote men and asked them if they wanted to study the Bible with me. And the main prison that I work at now is Polk Correctional. I also work part-time at Avon Park and Hardy CI. So I wrote the men, and finally one day I got the nerve up to go in, and I started a Bible study at Polk Correctional. Correctional, and I was teaching Bible study every week there. After I was doing that for a while, Daryl asked me to come up to Lottie to the services up there that he conducts at Lottie CI. And it was probably at the end of 2010, because Paul EOS'd in January of 2011. When I went to Lottie the first time, that's when I met Paul Gregory, my son-in-law. He was heading the Lord's table, and I thought, man, he did a really good job, and I was really impressed with the job that he did. Me and Daryl were driving back to Daryl's house, and we were talking about Paul, and Daryl was telling me how great Paul's heart was and a great guy he was, and I was just taking it all in. I came home, and I told my daughter, I was just joking, I said she was divorced. Her husband had cheated on her, so she divorced him, and she had been dating several men. One of them was a gospel preacher, and it just wasn't going her way. Things weren't clicking, and she wasn't just going to settle for any man. So I told Angie, I said, I'm going to hook you up with an inmate. And she laughed, and I was just joking, but she said, okay. And it really surprised me. And I came home and I told my wife that Angie wants me to hook her up with an inmate. And she didn't take it too good. So anyway, time went on, and I got to know Paul, and I was sitting here one evening, and Paul called me. And Angie and my wife Connie were sitting here in the living room. And I put Paul on speaker and didn't tell him. And Paul had a good conversation, and he was talking, and everything was good, and my daughter was listening to every word. At the end of the conversation, my daughter said she wanted to meet Paul. So we set it up where Paul and Ollie would come down here to Cork. And as Paul mentioned in his talk, that we asked Paul to preach. And from there, it's history. Paul and Angie clicked immediately. There's chemistry going on. It didn't take but about 2 minutes for Paul to push Ollie out of the way. And we're really thankful to God. I mean, this is a story of God's grace and God's love and His providence in working in my life and Paul's life, how we came from the world, came from a criminal element, and we can serve God and we can work in His kingdom. And today I've been in the prison work since 2010. I'm currently, like I said, working at Polk Avon Park in Hardy. I go up to Lottie every now and then to see Daryl. I've been to Lake Butler. I like going to Liberty CI with Daryl on occasions. Of course, because of COVID, we're not really going anywhere right now. But I appreciate all the fellow volunteers that help Daryl and Denny Townsend and Off the Chain Ministries for what they do, and I really enjoy it. I never really thought about teaching men into prison, but there's a prison on every corner, and there's lost souls there, and there's lots of men that earnestly want God in their lives. They just don't know how to get it done. So I'm very thankful for God's grace and His mercy working in my life. And I'm very thankful for Paul. I couldn't ask for a better son-in-law. He stuck with Angie from the first day to the last day, and he's the great dad to the kids, my grandkids. I just couldn't ask for a better person. So that's the end of my story. Thank you.